All right, you guys, welcome to another episode of Seahawks Forever. I'm Dan. You can follow me on Twitter, as it says down below, at Seahawks Forever. Yep, it's time. Today, I'm going to take my first crack at projecting the Seahawks 53-man roster. And this year, it may be more challenging than ever because of some positional issues. And what I mean by that, it's a good problem to have. I think they're going to carry different numbers at different positions this year based on new schematic impact, shall we say, from Clint Kubiak, John Benton, and the new offensive staff. Also, we know they're going to carry 3 quarterbacks. Those numbers have to come from somewhere. Where are they going to come from? Who's on the bubble? Who's going to make the cut? Who's not? Let's get into it. That's coming up next.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
All right, you guys, welcome back to the show. It's been a day. I've pulled a double today, a double shift, if you would, at least the content creator version of what a double shift would be. If you're a Mariner fan, and I know they're about to get started against the Houston Astros right now, game 2 of a crucial 4-game series down in Houston. And maybe some of you, I guess if I'm addressing you and you're not watching, you're not going to hear this, but maybe some of the typical viewers here are watching that series. But Mariners Forever launched today officially with my co-host Michael Thompson. Get on over and check that out if you would. We just kind of recap the season to this point, ask how the team got to where we are, and kind of where we go from here. So that'll be fun to watch. But today we're going to talk Seahawks, obviously, and roster projection. These are fun. I will certainly get comments both on Twitter and in the YouTube comments down below that this is a ridiculous exercise. Some people think that these contributors to list season are unnecessary, but you know that that's not correct, right? Because you're here because you want this information, you want this content. We love football, and we're going to talk about it 365 days a year. But it's different this year, isn't it? Because of what I touched on in the intro there, not just the impact that carrying a third quarterback on the roster may have, but also some differences in personnel usage on offense when it comes to running backs, with a fullback now having to be rostered, and tight end. There are also some things, as I went back and looked at the initial 53-man roster from last year and some other years past, that are different in the offensive line. They carried a higher number last year than they typically do, 11 offensive linemen. Much of that was just because they had a bunch of young guys that they wanted to develop, that they liked, then they didn't want to risk losing them if they exposed them to waivers. And so those numbers have to come from somewhere. You can only have 53, right? And so I came up with 26 on offense, 24 on defense. And if that seems odd, if you're thinking, well, shouldn't it be 50-50? That's the exact same split that they started the year with last year. And then, of course, your 3 specialists, your long snapper, and your kicker and punter. Before we get to that, if you would please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you don't already. If you want to get notified whenever there's new content, you can hit that bell button for sure. And if you want to help support me as an independent content creator, all the different ways you can do that and donate to the cause are down below in the description with links and everything that you will need. As you can see, also, this is new down in the, I guess as you're looking at it, the left-hand corner. You can see your comments and your questions in running form. So you can see as soon as it's posted. So can I, but I can still post them on the screen as well. And we'll get into some of those. I mean, we always like to get the Go Hawks and the initial hellos on there, right? Dogzilla Monster here, as always. I think he has near perfect attendance on the channel. Kurt says, love your work, Dan. Watch every day from Tasmania in Australia. Appreciate all the work you put in. Speaking of the Mariners in Australia, by the way, see, you pull a double shift, and now my mouth doesn't work. What the hell is happening? It's like when you pull a double shift in a restaurant, your feet give out, your back gives out halfway through the day. I guess the risk as a broadcaster is that the tongue gets a little tired. Motive says, go Hawks. John is impatient, says, let's see the roster. We'll get there. Steph says, looking forward to this one. Solarius says, hey, Seahawks fam. Also looks like the Stanford logo. So I had to pick up a new hat because all my Seahawk hats, with two exceptions, have either the action green or some version of it in the hat, and that acts as a chroma key, like the green screen behind me, and it picks up the images. And so I had to take those out of the rotation. Decided to get something a little more generic. Okay. Hoop Craze says, I want Ricky White on it. All right. Should we end the suspense? Here we go. This is what I came up with. In blue, it's just kind of my attempt at projected starters. You know, obviously some of that changes. Sometimes they'll open in nickel, and so you have a third corner, maybe only one linebacker at a time. You know, those kinds of things. Couple of things here. As you look across the top of each position, you'll see a number next to the position group in parentheses. That is the number that they kept at that position last year. What was interesting about that is, and I touched on this already, I've always had these numbers anytime I do this over the last couple of years, and they really, when Pete Carroll was in town and he and John Schneider were teaming up, the numbers never changed that much. Pretty consistent. And then, as I mentioned last year, they kept the 11 offensive linemen, including 3 centers to start the season last year, if you'll remember, because they also had Connor Williams on the roster. They did that in an attempt to protect those young players. But I don't think it was ideal. And they probably would admit that they had to run short at a couple other positions. Now, the quarterback thing is, in my opinion, set in stone. There are some out there who believe that if Jalen Milroe looks good enough in the preseason, that they might jettison Drew Lock and just roll with Milroe being the backup. A couple of things there. I think John Schneider learned his lesson running with a rookie quarterback as the backup with Trevon Boykin years ago. But also, if you believe that, if you believe what I just said, that Drew Lock is expendable, you just haven't been listening to John Schneider and you haven't been watching the way that they operate. They wanted Lock back last year. They made him a solid offer. It's just that the Giants came along and offered him the opportunity to start and the chance to make $8 million if he hit certain playtime standards. The Seahawks couldn't and weren't going to offer that or match that. And so at first opportunity, they brought him back. They love Drew Lock. And regardless of what you think about him as a player, you know, we saw him step in when he needed to, and Geno Smith went down a couple of years ago and led them to a big win here at home against Philadelphia, the game-winning drive. He did some good things when he had a chance to play for the Giants late last year, including probably his best statistical game of his career, where he accounted for 5 touchdowns in a game at the end of the year. Sort of Matt Flynn-esque in the way that he did that. But he's also just a guy that's beloved in that locker room. He's the perfect teammate. He's the perfect backup quarterback in that sense. He's never going to cause any issues. He's always going to be prepared. He's going to be ready to go. He's going to study the playbook. He's not going to pull a Billy Joe Hobart on you. And he's going to give you a chance to win if he has to step in and play. So they're going to go with 3 quarterbacks. There is no chance, 0 chance, that if they expose Jalen Milroe to waivers at the 53-man cut down, that they would be able to pass him through to the practice squad. Somebody would swoop in and claim him. And so that's one spot already that we have to account for. The other one is fullback. The Seahawks have typically, in recent years, only kept 3 running backs. And so even if you take fullback out of the equation, this thought, and this is why I wanted to do this today. I've been talking about this so much. It came up again on the live stream. And those of you that were there for that was so much fun. Really appreciate the engagement and all the questions there. We even talked about some non-football stuff. And then I gave you my top 5 all-time football movies. If you haven't checked that out yet, go do that. But the thought that Walker, Charbonnet, Ken McIntosh, and Damian Martinez are 4 running backs you want to keep. Even did a show last week on, is that the strongest and deepest young running back room in the entire league? But if you're going to roster a fullback and he's not a guy that can really play another position, and Robbie Oots played tight end at Alabama, we know that. And so this could be one of those positions right off the bat that is subject to change and could be fluid. I just didn't see a spot on the roster for McIntosh. I also believe that coming out of a draft where there were 30 draftable running backs, one of the deepest running back classes we've seen in a long time. And if you go out and you look at the free agent list right now of some of the good veteran running backs that are still out there unsigned, some of them not even 30 years old yet, guys that have really been productive when given the opportunity in their careers, I think there's a good chance Kenny McIntosh, a guy that showed up at the combine, ran a 4.55, 4.6 40, hasn't really had an opportunity to put a lot of snaps on tape the last couple of years. As much as we like him, and he did get an opportunity to show what he could do at the end of last year, I think he gets through waivers. And I still think you can get him through to the practice squad. And so sometimes these decisions have to be made based on that factor. Not necessarily, do I want this guy on the 53-man roster because I think he's better than this other guy? But do we need to protect him or not? Can we get him through to the practice squad? I think that's going to come into play when we get to the offensive line as well. And so right off the bat, that's maybe the first surprise that some people might not expect. I just think Damian Martinez has a much higher ceiling than Kenny McIntosh. And I like Kenny. And certainly with the possibility they might let Ken Walker walk next year, maybe he's a guy that you want to keep around, keep in your program, right? But that's how I went there. And listing Oots as just a fullback, knowing he can play some tight end, but that'll come into play here in just a moment as well. So we get to wide receiver, and I actually went into this exercise thinking I might just have to keep 5 wide receivers to make up for that. And that still may be the case. I wrestled with Jake Bobo in this scenario, right? I think Ricky White is a near lock. I think he's a special teams demon. It's one of the reasons they drafted him. But I also think he has significant enough upside as a guy that can contribute as a receiver in the long term. And with Cooper Kupp and his injury issues and his age and really only being on a 2-year deal, Valdez Scantling only being on a 1-year deal, I think they drafted those 2 young receivers with the future in mind. I could absolutely see them not putting Bobo on the 53-man roster for a couple of reasons. And I know he's a fan favorite, and this will freak some people out. 2 things. One is I think he would have a good chance to get through waivers and get to the practice squad. There's just a flood of receivers out there that are always available. Go look at that free agent list and some of the guys that are still there, right? And then a guy who, famously ran a 4.7 at his pro day. He's not going to be for everyone, okay? There's a reason he wasn't drafted. And again, similar to McIntosh, didn't really have an opportunity to put a lot of stuff on tape last year. I think there is a chance he could get through waivers. I went ahead and went with it here with the thought that in a pinch, especially if you're going to go 12, 13 personnel, short yardage, red zone, you want to get a heavy package in there, you could line Oots up in line. Or if a guy gets hurt, Oots could kind of be your 3rd, 4th blocking tight end also, right? But that's the first position I really struggled with, was that one. Which brings me to my tight end. And you'll see right off the bat that one of the Seahawks offseason signings was that I did not have Eric Saubert making the roster. And the determining factor of that for me was to just take a look at his contract. There's hardly any guaranteed money on it, $200,000. They wouldn't feel it at all by cutting him. He was brought in for a very specific reason. He knows the scheme. He worked with Clint Kubiak, his 1 season as passing game coordinator in San Francisco. But he's a 31-year-old guy that's a journeyman that's bounced around. And again, he's another guy that might make it through waivers. He's a veteran. Teams, no one's going to claim him and have to pay him the veteran minimum. So he's another guy that might still be available even if you needed him later if a guy gets hurt early in the season. But also with the thought that Oots can line up in line and be a blocking tight end for you. It was a difficult decision. And then also lost in the shuffle there as well is Brady Russell. And that just comes down to, I like Brady Russell. I like his versatility. I like that they're working him at fullback. He kind of fits that mold. I like some of the athleticism in the pass game that I saw on tape from his time at Philadelphia before they claimed him early last year. But he couldn't stay healthy. And they're just, at the end of the day, there just aren't enough roster spots to go around. You have to make some tough decisions somewhere. On offense, anyway, some guys that we like aren't going to be able to make this roster. Now, if you want to tell me that you'd rather take Jake Bobo off this roster and put Brady Russell on it, I can get behind that. You can justify that. Let's go back, because I think I saw down here in the corner that we got some guys already that really don't like the idea of McIntosh not being on the roster. Oh, Dogzilla Monster says he agrees completely. All right, thanks for watching, you guys. I'm gonna go home and make some dinner. Appreciate you watching. Follow me on Twitter. I'm kidding, but I do appreciate that. Yep, so here we go. John McGrath. Notice no McIntosh. Hope you're wrong about that. Who else are you going to take off? The Seahawks never get to their third running back. They just don't. And that's been a source of frustration. I wanted McIntosh to get some snaps at times. But even when guys were banged up and hurt, when Walker was hurt early in the season and Charbonnet was carrying the load, McIntosh didn't get carries then. They've only ever carried 3 running backs on the 53. It's extremely rare to go back in time and find a 4th running back at all. Take fullback out of the equation. Do you like Ken McIntosh's future and upside and ceiling better than Damian Martinez, John? I don't at all. I think Damian Martinez should have been a 3rd or 4th round pick. I think he's a future starting caliber running back in the NFL, and I think he fits the scheme perfectly. I like Kenny McIntosh, but it's a no-brainer choice for me if I have to choose between those two. Now, when you get into on the defense, yeah, we can have that discussion. It's just, it gets really light really quick. There are some teams that carry, 4 or 5 defensive tackles. The Seahawks often only carry 3. And we'll get to that on the defensive side. That's where it gets tricky. That's why this exercise is interesting and fun. Yeah, Steph says Brady Russell will not be forgotten. And honestly, I don't think he gets away from the organization. Again, I think he gets to the practice squad. All right. So let's go to the offensive line, because this is where some real hard decisions need to be made. And when you draft more offensive linemen over the last 3 years than any team in the NFL, 3.5 years, going back to the Lucas and Cross year, you're going to have a bunch of young guys on your roster, and there are going to be some hard decisions to make. I tended, as you can probably tell already from the list, I erred on the side of the guys they drafted this year were heavily influenced by the staff they have this year, by John Benton and all his years and experience and success as an offensive line coach in the NFL, by Rick Dennison, who also has all that experience and success in multiple positions, but also has worked with the offensive line, and Clint Kubiak. Mason Richmond was a guy in particular that Benton kind of pounded the table for and really wanted. And the reason I went with Mason Richmond over Mike Jarrell is because Richmond can play left tackle in a pinch. I don't know if he can ever be a full-time starter in the NFL at left tackle, but there's only 2 guys that have ever started for all 4 years, started as true freshmen and started for all 4 years for Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. And it's Mason Richmond and it's Tristan Wirfs. Pretty good player. Pretty rare company. He can play left tackle in a pinch. I don't think Mike Jarrell can. And, I think he has more of a development curve ahead of him coming from Division II. He showed flashes, certainly a good athlete for his size. In his first start last year against Atlanta, he held his own, but Atlanta had nothing on the edge. And so I think that's a guy too that probably gets through to the practice squad, and you're okay there and you can continue to develop him. So I erred on the side of they like those guys. The new staff likes those guys, right? So you go Cross and Lucas are no-brainers. Josh Jones was brought in for a reason. The people in Baltimore rave about him. He can play left or right tackle, still just 27 years old, real long, inexpensive. I think he's a near lock to make the roster. What I equate Josh Jones to is he's what we wanted Stone Forsythe to be, right? A guy that can play left side or right side, can start if you need him to, solid pass protector, but also decent in the run game. Forsythe he was billed as a guy who could start as a rookie and hold his own as a pass protector, but needed work in the running game. But he struggled as a pass protector too. So I think Josh Jones is a good, solid value signing there. And I think Richmond is a guy similar to last year when they protected LeMaya, Sundell, and Jarrell because they wanted a shot to develop him and they didn't want to expose him to waivers. I think they feel strongly enough about Richmond that they don't want to take that chance as well. Now, with some of these like bubble positions, if you're freaking out about it does tend to lend itself to the argument that these are kind of ridiculous exercises this early in the season, because if Mason Richmond goes out and struggles in the preseason, different story, right? But this is why we're doing this. This is all projection. Guard is where it gets super tricky because they've invested so much over the last few years. Obviously, I don't have Anthony Bradford on this list. I know John Schneider's talked about it. He tested at a near elite level for his size, and there are those who think he can survive in an outside zone scheme. I just think, again, the investment in Christian Haynes, who I expect to be the starter and I expect to play pretty well. I do. I haven't given up on him. I just think he got a raw deal last year with the former staff. LeMay is a guy that's been working out with Abe Lucas this offseason. They obviously leapfrogged him over Haynes last year. He had a couple of really nice moments. He was a huge factor in the win at Arizona when Charbonnet ran for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's athletic. He can move. But here's the reason I kept him on the roster as well. He played 2 years as a starter at Utah at right guard, 2 years at right tackle, made all Pac-12 at both positions. He's not a guy that can survive full-time at right tackle in the NFL, but if you get in trouble, he can play there. He can get you out of a game there if you're really, really banged up. If you get, like last year, where you lose, Abe Lucas wasn't ready. George Fant gets hurt 16 snaps into the season. Stone Forsythe gets hurt. Mike Jarrell has to play as a Division II rookie. In a situation like that, LeMaya can kick out and play a little bit of right tackle. And then Bryce Cabeldew is a guy that tested the most athletic guard in this entire draft, converted tackle from Kansas, played a lot of snaps at Kansas, got better every year, outstanding run blocker, struggled some in pass protection, but then last year was really solid, only gave up 2 sacks. They love him, had him in for a 30 visit. They've had their eye on him all the way through the process. He's a guy that I think is just so much more athletic and such a good scheme fit. He's one of Bryce Coots's favorites. I think he's another guy, just like Sundell last year and just like LeMaya, that they would be afraid to lose him if they exposed him to waivers. And also he has all that tackle experience playing at Kansas in the Big 12. So again, versatility. If you're going to go with fewer offensive linemen and only this year going with 10 instead of 11, because you're not going to carry 3 centers. They never really did until last year. And it was just because they wanted to protect Sundell and Connor Williams was coming off an injury. So if you're going to carry 10 instead of 11, you have to be versatile. That's why Mike Jarrell's not on this roster, and that's why Anthony Bradford's not on this roster for me. I see some stuff in the comments that's a little odd. So let's go to the comments before we move over to the defense. Let's see. Jen, I think this is going to be one of the most interesting position battles in the preseason. I went with Oluwatimi as the projected starter here just because he's he's the incumbent, right? But, I've talked a lot about how, as bullish as I am on Oluwatimi, Sundell, I think he had like a 9.7 RAS score, very, very athletic center. You saw what he could do on that 26-yard touchdown run against the Packers by Zach Charbonnet getting to the second level and getting into guys. And now getting to play next to his one of his best friends and his college roommate, Gray Zabel, like you talk about continuity, there's a real chance that Sundell wins that spot. And but again, versatility, he's another guy that Mike Macdonald has actually referenced as someone that can play 5 different positions. And John agrees. Jamie says Pete would grab Jake Bobo. Not a bad point. He might. They need receiver help down there. I could see him actually fitting in quite well down there. But again, like Jake Bobo, I think is a perfect example of a player where you have to separate the head and the heart. And I'm just better at that than I used to be. And I love Jake Bobo. I love what he can give them, but he has limitations. Went undrafted for a reason. Couldn't crack the lineup last year for a reason. Now, one of those reasons might have been bad judgment on the part of the OC, but he's not everybody's cup of tea. And I just don't think the roster's worse without him on it. Let me put it that way. As much as I do like him, he's a fun dude too. All right. Now, let's get into the defense. And again, John says, I'd rather cut Mike Morris and keep McIntosh. Well, then you're going to be really, really light on the defensive line to keep an extra running back who's not going to play. He's just not. Because I think even if McIntosh makes this roster and you keep 4 running backs, I think Martinez is ahead of him on the depth chart. You know, one of the reasons that McIntosh was drafted so low for all the work he did at Georgia in the passing game, out of the backfield, catching balls, not a good pass protector. Maybe he's better now. You would hope that a player would improve. You would expect a player to improve. Yeah. All right, so we get to the defense, and again, this is where, you know, they only keep 24. They did last year, and so I did in this projection again. Versatility rules the day. The more things you can do, right? And then also when you get down to the bottom of the roster, you have to weigh, can a guy get to the practice squad or not? Okay. So last year they kept 3 defensive tackles and 3 defensive ends. I just don't think they can do that. And so, you know, if you're going to say cut Mike Morris, well, now you're going to keep only 6 defensive linemen. That's just really, really tricky for me. Now I'm with you, 100% with you. I put Mike Morris on here only because I don't think there's anybody else on the roster right now that can challenge him. Like you can say Jared Ivey, but they list him as an outside linebacker. He's you know, he might be. They do have a similar skill set. And so maybe you keep another outside linebacker, maybe a guy like Connor O'Toole, who they gave one of the highest UDFA guarantees to. Maybe he has a good camp, proves that he can play outside linebacker. Maybe Jamie Sheriff as a hybrid, you know, because now they're cross-training him as a stack linebacker. If you can add another offensive or outside linebacker there, and if you view Jared Ivey as a guy that can play inside and out like Mike Morris, yeah, this is Mike Morris clearly on the bubble. He did not take a step forward last year. I was really disappointed by that. He was healthy, presumably, for the whole season. He was one of my draft crushes coming out in the draft. I was ecstatic that we got him. Just motor for days, length, inside out, size. But he's got to take a step forward. He has to. Something has to click this year or he's not going to make the roster. I think this is a position that is ripe for swapping someone out at the cut to 53, which I just call it the next wave of free agency now. Did the math last night. It's 1,200 new free agents become available on the day with just the single cut now to 53. And so if Morris doesn't show something in the preseason and show that he can be a contributor, because that's the thing. If you're only going to keep 6 or 7, I've got 7 here, defensive linemen, let's call them, because even the Seahawks, they're kind of weird on their roster about how they list some of these guys, right? Like Jaron Reed, let's see. Let me remind myself. So they actually have Jaron Reed listed as a nose tackle when last year he only played 11% of his snaps at the nose. They do not have Jonathan Hankins listed as a nose tackle. It's just one of the anomalies of their roster. They actually have Hankins and Bohanna listed as DTs. It's very, very bizarre. Whereas they have Mike Macdonald listed as a defensive, or Mike Morris listed as a defensive end, not an outside linebacker. But they do have Jared Ivey listed as a linebacker. So I did try to take some of that into account, take that for what it's worth. But I think this is an opportunity both at the nose tackle position, and I only put Bohanna there because he weighs 335 pounds, and he has the experience playing for Aden Dirty in Dallas. Actually played some pretty significant snaps his first 2 years in the league and was a good contributor in that rotation. But that's the key word. You're rotating so heavily in this. You really only want these guys, even Leonard Williams, you're hoping that you can keep him to maybe 60% snap share. You don't want these guys to have to play the entire game. And so I think defensive line is going to be ripe for potentially seizing an opportunity if one presents itself at the cutdown. And then even if Mike Morris does make the team, he's probably living on borrowed time because I've got him there in yellow. Riley Mills, the rookie out of Notre Dame, coming off the ACL injury. They don't expect him to start the season on the active roster. They expect him to start it on the PUP. But when he's ready, Morris or Ivy would be the guys that get bumped off the roster. But then we slide right over to outside linebacker, and there's question marks here too because they've almost always kept 5. Last year they did. They kept 5. And again, surprisingly, DeMarcus Lawrence listed as a defensive end, not an outside linebacker. So in this scheme and the way that they plan on using him, that's why I have him there. You could make the argument that he's kind of an outside linebacker, but that's not where they list him. But last year they kept 5, right? Because they had Draymond Jones listed as an outside linebacker in addition to Mafe Hall and Nwosu, and they had Trevis Gibson. Gibson hardly ever played. That's why I feel comfortable just going with 4 here. Because those guys are all interchangeable too. Like you can say that Morris is a defensive end and Ivy's an outside linebacker, but Ivy can play inside and reduce down on passing downs just like Morris can. Morris can play outside and can drop a little bit. So can DeMarcus Lawrence, even at 32 years of age. So a lot of those guys are interchangeable. And then inside linebacker was really tricky. They kept 4 last year. They've almost always kept 4, but the 4th guy almost never plays. Right? Like Patrick O'Connell was active for quite a few games last year. Never saw the field. The 3rd guy hardly ever plays. McDonald will use 3 linebackers at times, but we didn't see much of Drake Thomas last year, and he was the number 3 all year. They really like Drake Thomas. They love him from the neck up. He's just a little undersized, but he is a guy that gives them some versatility. He can play Mike. He could wear the green dot if he had to, if there's injury issues, or he could play the weak side. And then I put a 4th guy in there just because of the history. You could make the argument, and I've seen it in the comments, someone said, get rid of Jackson. 2 things about that. Okay, fine. Because I think with as much as they're going to play nickel, I think they could very well roster only 3 inside linebackers on the 53. And when I do a projection, closer to the start of the season, after we've kind of seen what the usage looks like in the preseason, that could certainly change. I put Jackson in there because of what Griffin Sturgeon said on the show earlier this week. He had a 4th round grade on Jackson and says his ceiling is NFL starter. He feels that strongly about him. Doesn't know why he didn't get drafted. Doesn't know why the Seahawks went with Jackson Woodard originally over him and then ended up releasing Woodard after minicamp and immediately signing Jackson. But he's really, really bullish on him. But if you want to go with 3 inside linebackers, you can do that. And here's one of the reasons. If you slide on over, let's jump over cornerback for a second. And let me take this off just so it's not covering it up. But Nick Emenwari in his rookie year, while he's being, according to Mike McDonald, quote, trained to be a safety, he's going to be a box safety. And most expect, and McDonald's spoken directly to this, that he's going to play in the box. That he's going to play, as Garrett Greenlee said on the show the other day, just strip down his responsibilities, make it as simple on him as possible. Play him in the box, run and chase, do what he does best, cover running backs and tight ends. He can do that. But also in nickel and on passing downs, when teams are trying to spread you out, he can essentially play weak side linebacker role. Now, will he be ready to have that much on his plate as a rookie? Don't know. And that's where I could see them, doing that. But also, if Derek Jackson shows up and has a great camp, this could be a very similar situation to what we saw with the offensive line last year, where they keep him on the 53 just because they don't want to expose him to waivers. He also has an opportunity, if he has a great camp, to leapfrog Drake Thomas. because Jackson's skill set also, he likes to come forward. He can stack and shed. He can play Mike. He can play Will. He can cover better than you might think he would looking at his dimensions, the fact that he carries 240 pounds on his frame. So that was another one of those situations where it's like, kind of an eye towards the future. A guy with some versatility but better size than Thomas. We just don't want to risk losing him. Safety, I think, is pretty cut and dried. They brought some guys in. D'Anthony Bell is a guy, a great special teamer, and when he's had a chance to play, he's done some good things, but the contract would suggest that they don't have a lot of commitment to him. Like, you wouldn't even miss him financially if you moved on from him. So that was one that I decided to go err on the side of youth. Cornerback, we know they've been looking at veteran corners, and so this certainly could change. Woolen, Witherspoon, Jobe, Pritchett, I think has to earn this spot. This is not set in stone. He has to have a good offseason. I think he has to have a good training camp. He has to have a good preseason. We saw flashes. From him. That last preseason game, I remember a couple times he came up and really impressed me the way he came up and hit in the running game. And then we certainly saw the coverage skills at the Senior Bowl and at Auburn. Again, that's a guy that's they're invested in, but best guy's going to make the roster, right? So if they do make a move, or one of the young undrafted free agents, a Zy Alexander, if he has a great camp, has an opportunity to leapfrog Nehemiah Pritchett. Pritchett's not just going to make the team because they spent a 5th-round draft pick on him. And then Shamar Jean-Charles is a guy that was in New Orleans last year, another guy that's had some success on special teams, kind of a late bloomer, kind of kicked around for a couple of years, but got a chance to play last year, really showed some good ball production, like the ball skills. But this is fluid. They're kicking the tires on everybody. We know they had Shaq Griffin in here. We know they had Rasul Douglas in here. Why haven't those guys signed yet? It might not be. As fans, sometimes we always want to say, why haven't they signed him yet? Well, it takes two. Douglas has turned down other offers from other teams. That has been reported. He may just be waiting for a better opportunity if he doesn't like what the Seahawks are offering. Because if they do sign a veteran corner, it's not to start. And just as a side note, I saw a trade proposal today from a guy on Seahawks Twitter proposing we trade Boye Mafe and a 4th-round pick to the Miami Dolphins for Jalen Ramsey. I don't know what that guy was on, but I don't know. Maybe I want some of that. So again, tough choices there, but regardless of which way they go, I trust Mike McDonald and Carl Scott to make the right decisions in the secondary. But that's another one that's fluid. If there's a young player that they had a high grade on that they like that gets cut from someone else on the 53, I could see him going after him, because John Schneider did say that was a missed opportunity in the draft. That was one of the regrets. And I think there were a couple of spots there late when they took Cabeldew and when they took Richmond that they were just so committed to adding more bodies that were scheme fits to the offensive line that I think corner was the opportunity cost. And they wanted to come out of this draft with a corner. I think Schneider made that pretty clear and said there was still work to be done there. So this might be kind of a similar case to how they handled that left guard spot, where they took their shot at Will Fries as a veteran, and then they kicked the tires on just about every other free agent, but they just didn't like him enough. They just didn't think they would be better than what they had on hand. And they may be approaching this that way too. They just might not like Rasul Douglas and Shaq Griffin at this point in his career enough that they may see an opportunity down the road to get a younger guy that they like more. And if there's a player that they had on their draft board that they were considering taking on day 3, 5th, 6th, 7th round, but they went these other directions, and one of those guys gets cut, a team tries to pass one of those players that they like through to the practice squad, and that may not be the case either, because that cornerback class kind of dropped off after the 4th round. It was pretty weak, but they might make a move there. So it's always interesting to go back and look at these when you get closer to training camp, because on a scale of 1 to 100, I would say my confidence level that this might be accurate in any way, shape, or form is probably a 55. I'm going to be honest with you. Except for one position group, I'm pretty confident in my projections for the kicker, punter, and long snapper. And it's not just because they only have one of each. You know, that is something. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember this, but it used to be a thing that you would always bring in competition for those positions. You would always bring in a second punter and a second kicker. And I remember being a kid and like being intrigued by that. Like, ooh, I wonder if this punter's going to be good. I wonder if this kicker's going to be good. I do think we're going to be talking about Jason Myers next year in the kicker position, and maybe time for the Seahawks to even spend a draft pick on a kicker. And then one other note about safety too. I think Jarek Reed kind of gets forgotten and lost in the shuffle. I just really, really liked the flashes that we saw in the preseason as a rookie, and he was another guy that had a reputation coming out of New Mexico State as a special teams demon. And then he got hurt and he had that real severe injury, and then was healthy all last year, but just didn't get a chance, or once he got healthy last year, didn't get a chance to contribute. It'll be interesting to see. They've talked about him very little. I mean, if I was at one of those press conferences, I would have asked more about Jarek Reed. I don't think enough people did to get Mike McDonald's thoughts on him. And he probably would have given lip service and said nice things about him, as he always does. But I think there's some upside there. And, with Kobe Bryant in a contract year, who knows what his value is going to be. I think he's ripe for an extension even before training camp starts this year. I want to see what Jarek Reed can do with a healthy preseason. Really, really excited about that. That's what I got, you guys. It was hard. And I'm still, like I said, I'm not sure about this. I think that's good news. In years past, this exercise felt like it was easier, but that's not a good thing. If you don't have enough guys fighting for those bottom of the roster spots, that's not a good problem to have. That means your roster is struggling a little bit. There's just so much youth on the 90-man roster right now, over 40 rookie contracts. It's near the top of the league. I don't know if it's number one, but I know it's close. Youth is volatile, and you just don't know from one year to the next what you're going to get. With some of these big guys, they just aren't physically developed, until they're 25, 26 years old. They'll tell you that. So maybe Mike Morris makes a huge leap as a rookie. Maybe Jared Ivey shows up to camp and we're all like, that's why he didn't get drafted, right? Maybe Nwosu gets hurt again. That defensive line group worries me because of the lack of depth. And even, some of you have asked in the comments about what about some of the undrafted free agent tackles? Like, couldn't they be the nose tackle? None of them are over 300 pounds. They're all small school, smaller guys. I just don't think any of them have a legitimate shot. I think there's a good chance that if I had to put an over-under on the number of players that will end up being on the 53-man roster that aren't currently on the 90-man roster, right, that will be from other organizations, I think I'd put that number at about 3.5 right now. I think it's real possible that 3, 4, 5 players that aren't on the 90 right now, that are on other rosters, end up being added to this thing. So, and then I don't know if any of you have said it over in the comments, but it's hang on a second. But the Noah Fant thing is interesting as well, right? I still think the idea that some people just assume he's going to be moved off the roster because his cap hits $13.5 million, it's irrelevant at this point. The Seahawks have $30-ish million in cap space, even with Fant on the roster. And even if they start to extend guys, they could announce tomorrow they've extended Kobe Bryant and Boye Mafe, and they still wouldn't have to cut Fant to make that happen because of the way they're going to structure the deal, and the first year cap hit's going to be lower. And I think Clint Kubiak really wants to play with him. I think he wants to see what it looks like to go 13 personnel with Fant, Barner, and Arroyo with Njigba and Cup. Like, that's fun, right? So that's where I'm at on that. I just don't think that they're going to move him off the roster unless they have to, and I don't think they're going to have to. I think he's on this team in 2025. I really do. John's really adamant about to keep all 4 running backs, but I just don't. The opportunity cost scares the heck out of me. They never play their 4th running back ever, except 2019 when Marshawn Lynch had to come off the bench or come off the couch. But McIntosh will not get claimed. I'm confident that he'll be on your practice squad. I like George Halani too. Talked about it in the running back show. Like, the Seahawks are loaded. 5 guys that could start and be effective on rookie contracts. That's insane. And they all have size. It's a cool group. It really is a cool group. John, I think you're right. I think they'll let Fant play out his contract. I even brought this up last night, and some of you heard this. But if he gets to camp and just looks like a perfect fit in the scheme, and Kubiak loves him and can't wait to play, mix and match with these guys, and they do some of these other extensions, and they want to reduce that cap hit, I would not be shocked. And again, I want you to bookmark this because I think I'm the only one that has suggested this out in the content creator media community. I could see them extending him again. I really could. So anyway, that's that. It's always fun to do those. I'm going to take tomorrow off for certain. Well, nothing's ever for certain, right? Who knows? Sometimes the Seahawks make news. Sometimes other people say things about the Seahawks I need to react to. Sometimes I just roll out of bed and decide, I need to talk about this today. But the plan is to take tomorrow off. And then we'll be back by Monday at the latest, you guys. Let's do this. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, and only about 55% of you have, please do. It's the best way that you can support me and help get these videos into the legendary YouTube algorithm. And if you want to be notified of new content, hit that bell, certainly. And if you want to support the cause and help support me as an independent creator and a full-time content creator, all the ways you can do that are down below in the description. Also, if you're a Mariner fan, and I'm going to go watch the rest of this game right now, hopefully they're doing okay down in Houston. Mariners Forever launched today, my new venture in the, what I'm just going to call it the Forever Network. Who knows? Maybe we'll just keep growing from there. Michael Thompson, formerly of Soto Mojo, joins me on that. Check that out if you would. That's Mariners Forever show on YouTube as well. Thanks, you guys. It's always great. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. Thank you for reminding me of that. As someone who's worked in the hospitality business and has had Sundays and Mondays off for years and years and years, I always get blindsided by these holiday weekends. And so may not see you until Tuesday. But if you subscribe and if you hit the bell, you're never going to miss a thing, nor will you if you follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. So thanks, guys. Love you. Really appreciate everything you do for the channel. Forever and always, go Hawks. I'm Dan. That's the show. Peace.